Las Vegas was once sold to the world as a perpetual money-making machine. The lights never go out. The flow of people never stops. And casinos, whether old or new, are always considered too big to fail. But perhaps the magic of 2025 is fading, as one by one, the names once considered eternal symbols of Vegas are falling into a state of exhaustion. It's not because of a lack of tourists. It's not because Las Vegas has lost its appeal, but because the operating model has changed. Casinos, once built as complete entertainment worlds, are now treated as balance sheet assets, where memories, people, and history have no value unless they generate sufficiently attractive profit margins. Vegas isn't just changing, it's shrinking. The casinos you thought would last forever are collapsing under mountains of debt, corporate greed, and a business model that no longer needs you. In this video, we'll show you which iconic casinos are dying, and the shocking reason why Las Vegas, the city that never sleeps, is losing its very soul, one resort at a time. Perhaps the nightmarish year of 2025 wasn't enough to awaken the leaders of Las Vegas to the fact that the once vibrant travel dream is slowly fading, and the neon lights can no longer hide the cracks beneath. And if a symbol were needed for the first domino to fall in the chain of collapses on the Strip, Caesars. Entertainment would be the perfect example. $12.3 billion, the equivalent of the lifetime earnings of nearly 4,000 American families. However, that is a huge debt that is weighing heavily on Caesars. A symbol once hailed as the arena of the American dream has now become a vivid testament to the brutal cost of greed. Caesars used to be a place where ordinary people could enter and feel like they belonged in the spotlight. But now, that light seems to operate like a tiered fee system, where emotions are converted into loyalty points and dreams are priced like a subscription package. The first cracks didn't come from the casino floor, but from Wall Street. Caesars is being removed from the S&P 500 index, effective before the market opens on September 22nd, 2025. This isn't a story of corporate ego. Being removed from that golden list means Caesars has fallen out of the group of companies stable enough to represent the United States in the stock market. But Caesars wasn't just undervalued. They were actually losing customers. In the second quarter of 2025, Caesars' revenue in Las Vegas decreased by 3.7% compared to the same period last year. It doesn't sound like much, but for a legendary corporation, that number means tens of millions of dollars have vanished. Room sales decreased, and occupancy rates dropped by approximately 2 percentage points, equivalent to 27,000 empty room nights in just 3 months. Meanwhile, the biggest shadow still hangs like the sword of Damocles. Caesars announced that they have $12.3 billion in aggregate principal amount of debt outstanding until December 31st, 2024. What's noteworthy is the word principal. This is the original debt, not including interest. A weight heavy enough to turn every operational decision into a question. What to cut? What to increase? What additional revenue to generate to pay? And when debt was high and profits were squeezed, Caesars did what corporations always do in the age of optimization. Shift to a more stable revenue model. Fixed fees, surcharges, membership cards for customer segmentation, and dynamic pricing to optimize each spending behavior. Vegas no longer sells services or experiences in the traditional sense. And then the gap between the listed price and the actual amount paid became a trap. Room rate plus resort fee, taxes on the resort fee, parking fees, early check-in fees, late checkout fees. The bill was so long, it felt like being led into a game where the rules were at the bottom of the page. Adults feel disrespected for not being transparent. The elderly feel insulted because they lose their dignity. Families with children are tired of the cumulative costs. And they all meet at one point. Eroded trust. Promotions are starting to be offered. But it's all like pouring water on hot sand. It might create a short-term bounce, but it doesn't cool down the underlying cause. When guests feel like every step is being charged for, their anger eventually translates into action. They shorten their vacations, choose off-strip locations, or simply choose a different city. Vegas is losing its vitality even in its own symbols. What was once a collective dream is now just a balance sheet with desperate numbers and debt. So, in the end, if even an icon like Caesars has to rely on surcharges to pay off debt, is Las Vegas selling entertainment, or is it selling a form of private tax on your vacation? And when a CEO has to prove viability with cheap prices and promotions, is that a sign of recovery? Or a sign that trust has been damaged? Domino deployed the first troops, and the next army is usually not the weakest one, but the one with the biggest money-making machine. MGM is standing there. Perhaps the Nevada heat hasn't subsided yet, so even a $1.5 billion dream in the heart of the Strip can evaporate in the blink of an eye. Not evaporate into the desert, but evaporate from the trust of tourists. If Caesars was the first domino to fall due to debt and market downturns, the Venetian was a different story, a luxurious palace being consumed from within by the very thing America does best, optimization. The Venetian was once the Venice of the desert, an empire that simulates ancient Europe with marble, domes, canals, gondolas, where adults enter and feel as if they have traveled the world without leaving the United States. Opened in 1999, the Venetian was hailed as the crown jewel of the Strip, a monument to an era when the Strip believed that property values and foot traffic would only increase, not decrease. Vegas at that time was like an artificial world. A few streets were Paris, Egypt, New York, and the Venetian was the brightest gem in that jewelry box because it sold something more expensive than gambling. The illusion of luxury and European nostalgia. But after 2 decades, what gradually led Venice into a period of decline wasn't architecture. It's a change in the player. The younger generation is less attracted to traditional casinos, while adults and seniors are becoming more sensitive to the feeling of expensive but no longer worth it. Vegas can still be dazzling, but once the experience loses its kindness and transparency, the lights no longer make people feel welcome, only being charged. In 2022, when Las Vegas Sands sold the Venetian to Apollo Global Management and VC Properties, the Venetian transitioned from an icon associated with a personal empire to an asset held by private equity. And that transformation often brings with it something very American: the cold discipline of optimization. The Venetian is no longer just a resort to tell stories about, but an asset to be measured by profit margins, occupancy rates, and numbers that must look better each quarter. With Apollo, saving. Venice wasn't about romance, but about investment. The Venetian announced a one-tone, $5 billion plan for reinvestment and renovation to mark its 25th anniversary, not just fixing the interiors, but a comprehensive repositioning from guest rooms and services to conferences, transforming it into a new and more efficient version. It sounds like a revival, but it's also like a gamble, because a makeover won't work miracles if the customers don't return. And the summer of 2025 shows this bet is starting to wobble. AP cited data from LVCVA showing 13% fewer international visitors. Hotel occupancy down about 15%, and only about 3.1 million visitors in June 2025 alone, a decrease of 11% compared to June 2024. Those numbers aren't just data, they're the heartbeat of a city. Mayor Shelley Berkeley described the flow of visitors from Canada, Nevada's largest international market, as having dwindled from a waterfall to a small drop. Mexico also missed out, including the High Rollers Group. That language sounds metaphorical, but it's living statistics. The market is literally drying up. Even the industry-wide picture reflects a tightening atmosphere. Las Vegas Sands Q1 2025 figures show net revenue of 2.86 down from 2.96 and a significant decrease in net income. While this isn't unique to the Venetian, it suggests that Vegas's default growth phase is coming to an end, and when growth is no longer obvious, the familiar solution always returns. Cut costs. Venetian has a workforce of approximately 8,500 people, and the confirmed cuts are under 50 positions, primarily management executive. But what worries people isn't 50. It's a signal. Even the Golden Palace starts by cutting the bones before cutting the meat. The halls were still lit, but everyone felt the empty footsteps increasing as shifts were reduced and work schedules became fragile. The irony lies in this. The renovation project continues. The slogan still talks about bringing glory back. The drills still echo through the night. But behind the soundproof walls are lives waiting for an email deciding their work shifts for next week. In Vegas, the future is always built with the clatter of chips on the betting tables and can also be paid for with the alarm of an invalid time clock. The collapse of the Venetian therefore served as a wake-up call. Not every crack can be filled with money. Sometimes what needs filling is trust, and trust can't be bought with 0.5 billion. If the Venetian is a palace consumed from within by optimization, the next domino piece won't be a palace anymore, but a place that teaches the entire strip a lesson about price and cost. MGM, a revenue machine where surcharges become the new norm. MGM was like a factory. There, joy isn't sold as a souvenir, but packaged into lines of fees. And you only realize this when the bill arrives. In the corporate strip model, everything is standardized, measured, and optimized like airline pricing. Efficient, cold, and sometimes making visitors feel less like guests and more like a number on a revenue sheet. The problem isn't that Vegas is expensive. The US is accustomed to paying for convenience. The problem lies in how Vegas, and MGM is the clearest representative, turns high prices into a psychological game. The initial advertising price might seem okay, but the final total cost balloons due to layers of surcharges that are legitimized as a default part. Resort fees and parking fees are no longer exceptions, but have become the new norm. According to industry reports, MGM has increased resort fees at many hotels on the Strip, some up to $55 per day, marking the second increase this year. That number is not just a fee, it's a message to enter the experience. First accept an invisible ticket, and when fees become commonplace, they hit hardest those groups most sensitive to feeling nickel and dimed, weekend travelers on a budget, seniors annoyed by the feeling of being legally scammed, and families with young children who see costs accumulating like an avalanche. Sadly, Vegas used to be a place to escape stress. But when every step has to be counted, it turns into a new kind of pressure, one that can worsen insomnia, financial stress, and even weigh down people with cardiovascular disease, high blood pressure, or diabetes. Escape suddenly became a problem, and the system has reason to do so. As the Strip's net profits decline sharply, businesses are increasingly motivated to seek more stable cash flow through fees. But the tighter the fees, the more trust erodes. When trust is broken, customers leave. It's a self-perpetuating cycle. MGM's problem isn't about a number. It lies in the fatigue accumulating in Americans. As fees become law, Vegas is forced to find other shocks to keep them coming. And that shock was the demolition of a 67-year-old icon, not because it was losing money, but because its land was worth more than memories. There are places that end with applause. Tropicana ended with a bang, and dust fell like the ashes of a bygone era. It wasn't a quiet death. It's a public message. Strip is changing ownership, changing the rules, changing its identity. And memories, even those spanning 67 years, can be erased with just a signature. Tropicana opened in 1957 and was once known as the Tiffany of the Strip, associated with the mob era and American popular culture. It's not the biggest casino, but it's part of the collective memory, the thing that makes people believe Vegas is a place with history, not just a staged show. However, Tropicana closed on April 2nd, 2024, making way for the Oakland A's MLB Stadium. 6 months later, it was imploded on October 9th, 2024. About 2,000 pounds of explosives, and the building collapsed in less than 30 seconds. An industrial funeral right in the heart of the Strip. But what caused the controversy wasn't the explosion. What angered Americans was the bill that followed. The stadium project is estimated to cost around $1.5 billion, including approximately $380 million in public funding. The question is therefore no longer, is sport good? But rather, who will pay for this future? Are taxpayers really spending money to build new memories? Or to subsidize a game where the benefits fall into the hands of a small group? The story becomes heavier when it touches on working life. Approximately 500 workers are affected. AP reports a severance agreement of about $2,000 per year of seniority under the union contract. The money might help them breathe for a few months, but it can't make up for the feeling of being erased from a city they served for many years. Of course, some will argue that a baseball stadium can diversify the economy and create new jobs. That's not wrong. But the risk is that the Vegas identity has become so commercialized, it's unrecognizable. From casino capital to sports hub, from a dream for all classes to a stage for deals. The more billion-dollar projects a city has, the more its citizens need something simple. Transparency in public spending and a mechanism for benefits. If a 67-year-old icon can be erased just because land is expensive, what else is immortal? Do you believe public funding for stadiums is an investment or a subsidy for a rich person's game? And now, let's look at a palace that doesn't need to be destroyed, yet can still lose its soul. The Mirage used to be where the entire Strip would stop for a few minutes to watch the volcano erupt. A free miracle, in a city that rarely gives anything to anyone without charging. But then Mirage closed down, as if free had become a sin. No explosions, no destruction needed, just an announcement and a closed door. Mirage's death was so quiet that it was even more painful, because it felt more like a decision in a spreadsheet than an event in history. For decades, the Mirage has been a landmark of modern Las Vegas. It taught Strip a lesson. Casinos are not just places to gamble, but experiential destinations. Even if you don't put a penny on the betting table, there are still reasons to stay. Volcanoes, tropical gardens, music, the feeling of stepping into another world. The Mirage makes Vegas feel like a story, not an invoice. But the Mirage closed on July 17th, 2024, to be redeveloped into the Hard Rock Guitar Hotel. That truth was reported by major newspapers. And if you only looked at the surface, it was a normal renovation, rebranding, asset upgrades, preparing for a new chapter. However, what hurts the audience is not the rebuilding, but rather its message. What once created the vibe of Vegas is now being seen as a cost that doesn't directly generate revenue. When miracles are weighed against profit, miracles always lose. Mirage became a model for a sophisticated type of collapse. Not immediate destruction, but a gradual dismantling piece by piece. Enclose each area, complete each item, and distort the experience by quarter. Then one day, collective memory was suddenly replaced by a development plan. And, at that moment, what was lost wasn't just a hotel, it was the way Vegas used to treat its very soul. The contextual data makes that story even more credible. Nevada FY 2024 saw record revenue, but a sharp decline in net income, with the Strip alone down by 40.4%. Profit pressure makes things that don't immediately generate money difficult to sustain. A city still makes a lot of money, but it's killing the things that make people want to come. If Vegas drops the free, it will have to make up for it with service. But the common feeling among the audience is more expensive, colder. And that's why Mirage became a turning point. When the magic dimmed, Vegas began to resemble a giant airport more than a place to dream. If the Strip is a gala where everyone has to wear a tuxedo, then Circus Circus is the old bar where you're allowed to breathe. It's not beautiful. It's not new. Many people even call it withered. But in a Las Vegas that's increasingly like a sophisticated toll system, Circus Circus has become a rarity, an acceptable entry point where you can still get in without stressing over every single surcharge. Circus Circus was once considered a living relic of old Vegas. But that very oldness became an advantage. Because modern Vegas is missing one thing: space for the middle class. When fees pile upon fees, when a weekend on the Strip feels like a budget test, Circus Circus survives on what corporate Vegas has forgotten. The feeling of, I'm still allowed to participate. Adults go to save money. Seniors want to have fun without calculating every fee. And families with young children need a trip that doesn't become a burden. They seek out places that are easy to understand. And the story here isn't just about nostalgia. It's an undercurrent of scandal that audiences feel is directly impacting their lives. Vegas is pushing the middle class out of the experience, not by prohibition, but by price and fees. Circus Circus proves the middle class hasn't disappeared. They've just been pushed to the margins. When an entertainment city functions as a financial filter, it doesn't need to say who gets in. It just needs to set the price high enough to automatically exclude people. System data explains why this is happening. FY 2024. Nevada revenue is record-breaking, but net income is down sharply, leading businesses to seek ways to squeeze cash flow from groups that still have spending power. At that point, the don't want to be pressured group withdrew and looked elsewhere. Circus Circus doesn't win because it's luxurious. It won because of its practicality, and that became an indictment of the Strip. Circus Circus therefore resembles a fortress. But a fortress is only meaningful when there's a front line to defend. And if Circus Circus is the last place where people still feel Vegas allows itself to exist, then downtown Fremont is the final frontier of Vegas with a vibe. Once downtown also becomes an optimization machine, the Vegas people remember will likely disappear for good. Fremont is like an old song playing again. Imperfect. Sometimes a bit garish. Sometimes a bit chaotic. But tom. But it reminds people that Las Vegas once had a heartbeat. If the Strip today resembles a giant airport, bright, clean, efficient, downtown Fremont is still a place you can enter without feeling like you need to ask permission with your wallet. Downtown Fremont is the original Vegas, less stratified than the Strip, more intimate. And, strangely, people laugh more easily. It's not entirely because it's cheap, but because of the feeling of not having to strain against bills. Here, comps and perks still exist as a language of survival. No one gets rich off a comped meal. But it's that small generosity that once made Vegas beloved. You're not just a customer, you're treated like a person. The future of Vegas, therefore, lies right in Fremont, with two very clear possibilities. If Fremont retains its identity, Vegas still has a place to breathe. But if Fremont were to be stripified, Las Vegas would become a giant airport. People would come and go. There would be no reason to stay. And even less reason to remember. What's noteworthy is that social trends are changing. American consumers are increasingly sensitive to fee transparency, the anti-junk fee movement is spreading. In that context, downtown has an advantage if it maintains its easy-to-understand value. The price is the price. The experience is the experience. This story becomes more real when you look at human life. A 68-year-old man, a former mechanic, said he only returned to downtown because people treat you kindly here. A 60-year-old woman, a former nurse, says Vegas now tires her out because of the fees. A 55-year-old man, a former hotel employee, said the staff's smiles were becoming increasingly tired because they too lived within a system optimized to the point of exhaustion. And then, amidst the bright LED lights on Fremont Street, you still see tents under luxury billboards, parking lots as wide as airports, and police cars cruising through the homeless area. A stark contrast between light and shadow. Las Vegas was once a promise, a place where ordinary people can step in and, even if only for a few days, are allowed to believe that life still holds a little magic. But as these symbols were successively closed, renamed, demolished, or optimized to the point of losing their soul, people began to understand that it wasn't just buildings that were collapsing. What's collapsing is a kind of collective belief. The belief that entertainment can be for all classes. That money spent will bring a feeling of respect. In this story, not everyone is a bad guy, and there is no single perpetrator. There's pressure to make a profit. There's debt. There are changing consumer habits. And there are management decisions that outsiders only see the results of. But the scariest thing is this. When everything is turned into a KPI, the things that make people want to come back, generosity, pleasantness, kindness, become the easiest things to cut. If you've ever had a memory in Las Vegas, whether it was at Caesars, the Mirage, the Tropicana, the Venetian, or just a night strolling under the lights, leave a comment, not to complain, but to preserve a piece of memory before it's replaced by a new project. And if you want to continue these kinds of stories about how American icons change under the pressure of money, debt, and optimization, please like, share, and subscribe to the channel. That helps the video reach more people, and it helps us keep these conversations alive longer than a news feed. This video was created with the aim of analysing and synthesising public information and reflecting on the social and economic trends impacting Las Vegas. Some figures and statements are taken from financial reports, tourism agencies, and mainstream media. However, market conditions can change over time. The video is not intended to attack any individual or organisation, and the content is commentary, not financial or investment advice. If there is new information or a different perspective, we are happy to update and acknowledge it in the comments section.